Hi, Jerry Jenkins here, talking about writing. I'm assuming this video appealed to you because you have a story idea and a message you long to share with the world. You've come to the right place. Now, I don't want to insult your intelligence, but let me clarify that novels are fiction. Some people don't know that and refer to memoirs or some other type of nonfiction as novels. Some even refer to fiction novels as if there's another kind. There isn't. So now that we're clear on what we're talking about here, if you're still interested in writing fiction, I'm guessing people have told you you have a way with words, a knack for storytelling, and you dream of proving them right. But privately, you're worried, fearful you don't have what it takes to write an entire novel, or that if you do finish one, you won't do it justice and no one will want to read it. Well, stay with me for a few minutes and I'll show you how to break through self-doubt and fear and write your novel. I've been doing this my whole adult life, and through my blog at jerryjenkins.com and the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild, I help writers like you craft compelling stories. Today I'm going to reveal my proven step-by-step novel writing process that even a beginner can use to create the best fiction you can imagine and avoid decades of trial and error. You may be surprised that even I still worry whether my story idea can carry a whole novel, and that I battle big league procrastination, and that I fear my writing won't be good enough, and I remain overwhelmed by the competition in an ever-growing marketplace. So how do I succeed in spite of all that? I use the repeatable novel writing plan I'm revealing today. Now let me urge you to stay with me to the end because I have a bonus novel writing step that includes a free checklist you can use to make sure you're happy with every word before you pitch your word to agents or publishers. So stay with me to get that bonus step and free download. All right, here we go. The first step to writing a novel is to settle on a winning story idea. We creatives often have myriad novel ideas, so how do we decide which one to pursue? The answer begins and ends with your passion. Naturally, a winning idea has to be weighty enough to carry an entire book of 75,000 words or more and keep the reader fully engaged the whole way. You need to prioritize your favorite ideas until you've landed on the one for which you have the most passion, the one that will get you up in the morning, draw you to the keyboard, and keep you there even when the writing comes hard. Your passion for the project must carry you through what I refer to as the marathon of the middle, that center half of your novel between your opener and your ending. This is where the story and the writing must not fade or falter. Beginnings and endings are easy compared to this because too many writers forget to keep the middle laden with drama, tension, conflict, action, and setups that demand payoffs. You must trust your gut when working your way through the marathon of the middle. If something bores you, it'll put your reader to sleep. If it feels flat, you'll lose your reader. If it chokes you up, your reader will sob. If it makes you smile, your reader will be warmed to his heart. Now, you'll likely grow discouraged, become frustrated, and feel like giving up more than once during the writing process. Only your passion for the idea will carry you through. I write novels based on only those ideas about which I'm most passionate. That's what keeps drawing me back to the keyboard. All right, once you've settled on your winning idea, step 2 is to determine whether you're an outliner or a pantser. If you're an outliner, you prefer to map out everything before you start writing. You want to know your characters and as much of what will happen to them as possible from beginning to end. If you're a pantser, you write by the seat of your pants. You begin with the germ of an idea and write as a process of discovery. Stephen King, probably the most famous pantser, advises putting interesting characters in difficult situations and writing to find out what happens. Now, neither option, outliner or pantser, is better than the other. One will simply feel most natural to you. But many writers are hybrids, needing the security of an outline and the freedom to let the story take them where it will. Do what works best for you. Regardless, you need to follow some form of structure to keep from burning out after 30 pages or so. I'm a pantser through and through, but I never start a novel without some idea where I'm going or where I think I'm going. I recommend using as a guideline what best-selling novelist Dean Koontz calls the classic story structure. In his book, How to Write Best-Selling Fiction, Kuntz recommends these simple basics. First, plunge your character into terrible trouble as soon as possible. Second, progressively make matters worse, despite your character trying everything he can to get out of the terrible trouble, until third, his predicament appears hopeless. Fourth and finally, complete your hero's character arc by his calling on every new muscle and insight he's gained along the way, so in the end he wins the day. Whatever basic structure you follow, you must grab readers by the throat from the get-go and never let go. All right, step 3 in how to write a novel is to create an unforgettable character. Your protagonist, also known as your lead or hero, and I use the masculine reference here to also include females, must have a character arc. In other words, become a different, preferably better person by the end. That means he has potentially heroic qualities that emerge in the climax. Unless he's a superhero, he should also have flaws, but not annoying or repulsive ones. You also want an antagonist, a villain as formidable and compelling as your hero. Take care that your bad guy isn't evil just because he's the villain. Most villains think they're right and heroic, so give him believable reasons, motivation for why he does what he does. Your important orbital characters must also be more than just caricatures from central casting. To help you develop these, I've created a list of questions to ask about each potential character. Now, if you're a pantser, you'll find yourself wanting to get to the writing and let them reveal themselves as the story develops. But here are the questions. What do they want? What or who is keeping them from getting it? And what will they do about that? Most important to remember about creating characters is that to be unforgettable, they must be believable. How do you achieve this? By injecting them with authenticity. Start by naming them distinctly. In other words, no similar names unless there's a point to that in your story. Make sure they even have different initials. And make them look and sound different from each other, too. The last thing you want is readers unable to tell your characters apart. Now, naturally, your lead character will face an outward problem, but his inward turmoil makes him come alive. He must face real fear and have to overcome inner weakness to achieve his obvious outer goal. Okay, on to step 4 in how to write a novel. Conduct thorough research. Now, though fiction by definition is made up, it must be believable to succeed. Even fantasies and science fiction books must make sense to keep the reader willingly suspending disbelief. That's where research comes in. Specific, factual detail adds flavor and authenticity. You get geographical, cultural, or technological details wrong, and your reader loses interest in your story. So here are some research resources. Atlases, world almanacs, encyclopedias, YouTube, thesauri, interviews, whether in person, by Skype, or by phone, Google, and similar search engines. Never shortchange the research process, but also be careful not to overload your story with every esoteric fact you've learned. Add specifics the way you season food. Research adds flavor. It's not the main course. Your story is the main course. Naturally, with a futuristic book, you'll be making up many of the technical details, but make sure they make sense and are consistent. Okay, the next step, number 5, is to determine your point of view character. From whose perspective you tell your story can be complicated because point of view involves more than simply deciding what voice to use between first person, I, me, second person, you, your, or third person, he, she, or it. It also involves deciding who will in essence serve as your story's camera as your point of view character. The cardinal rule is one perspective character per scene. But I prefer only one per chapter and ideally one per novel. Readers experience everything in your story from this character's perspective. What your point of view character sees, hears, touches, smells, tastes, and thinks is all you can convey. You're in his mind, employing his senses and emotions. Now, many beginning writers mistakenly assume this limits them to a first-person voice, but it doesn't. In fact, most novels are written in the third person, limited to that one perspective character, your lead. That means the story is limited to one perspective character at a time, and that character ought to be the one with the most at stake in each scene. Now, it's true that writing in the first person makes it easier and sound more natural to limit yourself to that one perspective character, but third person limited is most popular for a reason. While an omniscient viewpoint would allow hopping in and out of the heads of several characters in each scene, this style, so popular 100 years and more ago, has become archaic and extremely hard to sell. Yet many beginning writers who grew up on the classics mistakenly write their first novel from a godlike omniscient viewpoint and then wonder why publishers aren't interested. That's an error you can't afford to make. Now, don't assume that first person or third person limited makes it impossible to reveal your orbital characters. Study contemporary fiction to see how successful authors accomplish this through the perspectives of their main characters. Okay, before I get to the sixth step in how to write a novel, let me remind you of the bonus step at the end of this video that includes a free checklist I use every time I write a book. So be sure to stay with me to the end to get those. Now, step 6 in how to write a novel. Begin in medias res, which is Latin for in the midst of things. You must grab your reader by the throat from word 1. That doesn't necessarily mean with bullets flying or a high-speed chase, though that might work for a thriller. But it does mean avoiding too much scene setting and description instead of getting to the good stuff, the guts of the story. The goal of every sentence, in fact of every word, is to force the reader to read the next. You do this from the get-go by writing a great opener. Here are 4 types of opening lines you can use for your novel, and I've included my favorite example for each. First is the surprise opener. A great example of a surprise opener comes from George Orwell's 1984, which read like this. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. I'd want to keep reading, wouldn't you? Second is the dramatic statement. Toni Morrison wrote a great such opening line in her novel Paradise, which reads, "They shoot the white girl first." Wow, I'm reading on, aren't you? Third is the philosophical, and one of the most well-known philosophical opening lines comes from Leo Tolstoy's classic Anna Karenina. It reads, "Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." And finally, poetic. This example of such an opener comes from James Crumley's The Last Good Kiss. When I finally caught up with Abraham Traherne, he was drinking beer with an alcoholic bulldog named Fireball Roberts in a ramshackle joint just outside of Sonoma, California, drinking the heart right out of a fine spring afternoon. Regardless which type of opening line you choose, don't stop there. Many novels begin strong and immediately fizzle as the author slips back into explaining, describing, scene setting, etc. Once you have the reader by the throat, hold on till the end. All right, step number 7, trigger the theater of your reader's mind. Have you ever noticed that the movie version of your favorite novel rarely lives up to the book itself? How often have you heard or said yourself, "I like the book better"? I think the reason is obvious. Even with all its high-tech computer-generated imagery, Hollywood can't compete with the imaginative and dramatic theater of the reader's mind. Our job as writers is not to force readers to see things as we see them, but rather to trigger their own imaginations. Suggest just enough to engage their minds. That's where the magic happens. Give the reader a role in the experience so he can deduce and see what's going on without spoon-feeding him every detail. The key to this is showing rather than telling. You've likely heard this before, but don't despair if it confuses you. Here's the difference between telling and showing. Telling simply informs your reader rather than allowing him a role in the experience by deducing what you want him to know by what you've shown. You're telling, not showing, when you simply report that a character is tall or angry or cold or tired. If your character's tall, your goal should be to show others looking up when they talk to him, or have him duck to get through a door. That way the reader deduces that he's tall without your having to tell him. Rather than saying your character is angry, show his face flush, his throat tighten, his voice rise, or show him slam his fist on the table. When you show, you don't have to tell. Rather, you engage the theater of your reader's mind and involve him in the experience. Okay, step number 8 in how to write a novel is to ramp up your main character's trouble. You've grabbed your reader with a riveting opener and plunged your hero into terrible trouble. Now, make sure everything he does to get out of that trouble only serves to make things progressively worse. Too many amateurs make their hero's life too easy, the way we want our own real lives to be. Say their main character is a private eye. They give him great looks, good health, a nice car, the latest, most powerful handgun, a happy, gorgeous spouse, a beautiful apartment, a plush office, and a rich client with a juicy case to solve. Now, unless you're spoofing the genre, that's going to make for one boring story. When you run into a brick wall and your story lies flat after 20 or 30 pages, you'll discover you've made things too easy for your lead character. If you take nothing else from this video, remember this: conflict is the engine of fiction. Rather than setting your hero up for success by supplying him everything he needs, try the opposite. Try pulling everything out from under him. Give him an injury that mars his face, a disease that plagues him. Have his car stolen, his weapon go missing, his wife leave him, his business dry up so he can't pay his rent, his office burned down. And that client who shows up with the juicy case, she's destitute. What's he going to do now? All of a sudden, you have a real story. Conflict keeps your reader on the edge of his seat. The next step, number 9, in how to write a novel, is to make your hero's predicament appear hopeless. Writing coach and novelist Angela Hunt refers to this crucial plot point as the bleakest moment. It's where even you wonder how you're going to write your way out of it. Here's where the once reprobate lover, who has become a changed man and a devoted fiancé, falls off the wagon the night before the wedding. Caught red-handed doing drugs and drinking and cavorting with another woman, he sees his true love storm off, vowing to never speak to him again. Imagine the nadir, the low point, the bleakest moment for your lead character. Your ability to make things look irreparable can make or break you as a novelist. This is not easy, believe me. You'll be tempted to give your protagonist a break, invent an escape, or inject a miracle. Don't you dare. The bleakest moment forces your hero to take action, to use every new muscle and skill developed from facing a book full of obstacles, and prove that things only appeared beyond repair. The more hopeless you can render the situation, the more powerful your ending will be. Step 10, then, is to bring it all to a head. The ultimate resolution, the peak emotional point of your story, comes when your hero faces his final test. The stakes must appear insurmountable and failure an irreversible option. The conflict building throughout now crescendos to an ultimate confrontation, and all the major book-length setups are paid off. Give readers the payoff for which they've been set up. Reward their sticking with you, and let the fireworks play out in full. But remember, the climax is not the end. That's still to come, in step 11, where you leave your reader wholly satisfied. Because climaxes are so dramatic, endings often just peter out. Don't let that happen. Great endings have two things in common. They put the reader first, honoring his investment of time and money, and they keep the hero on stage till the last word. Now, the ending won't be as dramatic or action-filled as the climax, but it must be every bit as riveting. It should tie up loose ends, sure, but it also needs to pack an emotional wallop. Don't rush it. Take your time and write a fully satisfying ending that drops the curtain with a resounding thud. All right, it's time for your bonus step and your free download. Bonus step 12 for how to write a novel is to separate your writing and editing. I recommend editing and revising as part of your daily process so you don't write an entire draft before you decide what might need adjusting. But it's also crucial you keep these two elements entirely separate. Otherwise, your work may slow to a crawl. When I'm writing my first draft, I take off my perfectionist cap and tell my inner critic to shut up. I get the story down, not stopping to worry about cliches, redundancies, or even lacks of logic. I tell myself that the next morning I can let my perfectionism take over and rewrite to my heart's content. My goal is to be happy with every word, so I become a ferocious self-editor. While revising, I always follow this 21-part checklist and fine-tune every word, and it's yours free to download and use as you revise your own work. Simply click the link on the screen. I also put the link in the description of this video. All right, that wraps up this training on how to write a novel. If you found it helpful, please like it, comment on it, and share it with others. You can also subscribe to my channel to get more in-depth writer training. Just click the button below. Meanwhile, I wish you all the best with your novel, and I'll see you next time.